Hello, Eastside Youth. Um, this video is a kind of a recap of what we talked about on Sunday night. Sunday night, we continued our study in the book of Deuteronomy at our at a glance, kind of the big picture stuff. And this week, we looked at the relationship of love and obedience, especially when we start talking about the person of God and the things that God has told us to do. And so, just as a reminder, we talked about this a couple days ago at youth group, but that the book of Deuteronomy is essentially a big speech given by Moses to the people of Israel, the new generation of Israelites, getting ready to go into the promised land. Um, that that generation had spent 40 years on a journey that should have essentially taken 11 days. And so that is the background to what Moses has to tell them, and this is the next section of that. And this section has a lot to do coming off of last week's video on Covenant 3.0. In that, Moses gave them not really updates, but some things saying like, you guys are going into the land, you're going to be dwelling in a physical space rather than wandering around for 40 years as you have been. And so you're going to need a couple updates to um, some of the inner workings of how to follow some of these things. And so this last week we talked about Deuteronomy 12 through 26. And in that section, there's really just a lot of the big reminder. So if there was going to be like a theme that Moses keeps repeating, they say like when you teach or when you do a big lesson, you're supposed to repeat yourself and repeat your main point. Moses is strong on that in this section, and the main point is definitely do not be like the people who are in the promised land. You need to look different from them, and you need to be a people who, in looking different, points the people in that land toward your God, toward the one true God. Um, Over and over, there's a reminder, don't be like the people in the land. Don't take the practices that they have there and apply them to your own. Get rid of the practices they have there so that way you don't fall into doing them. All of these things. And that is kind of like in every aspect of life, Moses explores in these chapters of like, when you go into the land, there's going to be people there. Don't adapt the practices that they have. You need to look different. And that's that idea of being holy in the culture, is looking different from the culture, even though they're going to be living in the midst of those people for some time. Um, and then at the end of the towards the end of this set of chapters, Moses gives them kind of from God a a rule about having a king. And what's interesting is they don't have a king at this time, and they are told, when you ask for a king, when you call to have a king, make sure that that king doesn't get a whole bunch of wealth, doesn't take you back to Egypt to get a whole bunch of stuff for security, doesn't have a bunch of wives. Make sure that that king has the book of the law of the Lord in their midst at all times, so that way they can know their God and thus lead the people of God. And the reason that is because this king, whoever they are, that is not their people. That is God's people. And though he may be an earthly human ruler of God's people, he's not ruling his people, he's ruling God's people. So that king, whatever king the people of God have, is supposed to point the people of God to God. And the cultures around them see that and go, oh, that God's different. We want to know more about that God. Uh, and what's really wild is I think it was last year we were in First Samuel, and we saw that the people did pretty much exactly the opposite of that. They demanded a king. They didn't go for the one God picked. They picked Saul. Saul said, "Hey, God said, "Hey, David's pretty cool, but he's just a little kid. If you just give him a few years, it's going to be great." They still went with Saul, and then David was king. Um, and even though David was a man after God's own heart, we don't often read about how David had the book of the law of the Lord um, in front of him all the time while he's ruling, and he definitely had his mess ups. And then his son Solomon takes over, and he breaks the not many wives situation and the not much wealth situation. So just right off the bat, even if you look at the first three kings of Israel, things didn't go well. And then if you've been with us in Sunday morning looking at the kings in First and Second Kings, you know that it doesn't get much better. But all that to say is at the end of this section, Deuteronomy 26, verse 16, Moses says this day the Lord your God commands you to do these statutes and rules. You shall therefore be careful to do them with all your heart and with all your soul. You've declared today that the Lord is your God, and that you will walk in his ways, and keep his statutes and his commandments and his rules, and will obey his voice. And the Lord has declared today that you are a people for his treasured possession, as he'd promised you, and that you are to keep all his commandments, and that he will set you in praise and in fame and in honor high above all nations that he has made, and that you shall be a people holy to the Lord your God, as he promised. So in that it says that if you do the things that are written in this, if you as you go into the land, if you keep the law and you obey God and show God that in obeying him that you love the Lord your God, those two things are synonymous. They can't be separated. Um, Because if God is a good God, as we believe God to be, and God has said, hey, you should do this, we can trust that God is telling us, but in this case, the people of Israel, to do it for a good reason, something that is going to benefit them, or something that is going to produce something good in the future, either for them or for future people. And so when God says, do this, and you will be exalted high above all the nations, to the people of Israel at this moment, the call is to show that love for God through obeying what God has said. Um, and really the same is true today. We talked about how, like, we do not enter into a relationship with God by obedience. That's not how it works. We enter through the blood of Christ, through his death and resurrection. But then after that, like, we have a relationship with God. We have a relationship with Jesus. And so the way that we can show God and that we can show Jesus and the Holy Spirit that we love them is by doing the things that they tell us through the Word, things that we sense the Spirit leading us toward in our lives, and in the example that Jesus gave us in His life. Living those things out ourselves are ways that we can show that we love God through our obedience today as Christians, much after the people of Israel learned this lesson in the book of Deuteronomy. So that's kind of what we talked about Sunday night. If you were not there, we did miss you, and we hope that you are able to make it back to us soon. Um, just an update, if you did not see, we are going to be biking this next Sunday. Regular youth group start time at 4 p.m., but then after the lesson, we're going to be getting on our bikes and doing a little cruise across town. It won't be very long, and it'll be pretty slow. I think we're going to have the kid hauler with Silas and Sarah behind me, and so we're going to be moving at a pretty slow pace. Should be relaxing. We'll get a snack, get an ice cream treat, and we'll be back to the church. We'll probably be back a little bit after 6, probably about 6:30 this next Sunday. So we hope you can join us for that. Please bring a bike. If you need a bike, I think I got at least one, maybe a couple extra I can come across in the next few days. And please bring a helmet. That's what I'm going to tell you. Please bring a helmet. And yeah, we would love to see you Sunday for the bike thing. And then we have more stuff coming up for the end of July. But until the midweek, uh, see you soon. We'll see you Sunday, and if not, then we'll hope to see you as soon as we can. Oh, also, shout out, happy birthday, Christian. Today's Christian's birthday. Um, Word up, it's Christian's birthday. If you think about it, send him a message on Facebook or whatever. Happy birthday, Christian. And also, this weekend's Mackenzie's birthday. So there we are. Happy birthday, guys, and we will see you soon. Love you all. Bye.